You'd never eat an elephant. You know that already you didn't have to think about it, and no law ever told you to. But here's the part that should stop you. For almost the entire time there have been humans, we did. We tracked them. We killed them. We lived off them. Then, somewhere along the way, the biggest meal on land quietly turned into the one animal you'd gag at the thought of. Nobody voted on it. Nobody wrote it down. And by the time we're done, you're going to realize the real reason has almost nothing to do with the elephant and everything to do with you. Start with the coldest reason, the one that quietly rules out all the others. Money. Every animal that ever earned a place on a farm had to pass one test first. It has to give back more than it costs to keep alive and do it fast. A cow is almost a machine for exactly that. Breed her, feed her about a year, and you've got a freezer full of beef. A chicken does it in weeks. Now, run an elephant through that same test, and it falls apart on contact. A female is pregnant for nearly 22 months, the longest pregnancy of any animal on Earth. Then the calf needs 10 to 15 years to reach full size, and every day of that decade it eats close to 300 pounds of plants a day, and 50 gallons of water on top of that. You'd be shoveling a fifth of a ton of greenery into one animal every day for 10 years before it fed you once. You'd go broke long before dinner. Nobody in 10,000 years of farming this planet has ever made those numbers work. Because they don't. So on cold arithmetic, the elephant loses to the cow before you even pick up the knife. And yet that was never enough to stop us. Because for almost the entire story of being human, we tried anyway. We tried for about 2 million years. In the oldest layers at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania lie elephant bones scored with stone tool marks from roughly 1.8 million years ago. Not scavenged scraps, but deliberate butchery. Precise cuts along the bone, blows aimed to crack it open for the marrow. Your earliest ancestors weren't picking at what a lion left behind. They were taking the animal apart on purpose, and they kept at it for longer than our own species has even existed. Because back then, the awful math simply didn't matter. When the choice is one enormous animal or watching your children go hungry, you don't sit down and weigh the cost. You pick up a spear. One kill could carry an entire group through a season that would otherwise have thinned it out. For the overwhelming majority of human history, an elephant wasn't a problem to be solved. It was the jackpot. So if we ate them for 2 million years, what turned it off? Not mercy. Not taste. Farming did. The moment we learned to grow food on purpose, to plant a field and pen an animal that bred on a schedule, the whole equation flipped. Why gamble your life on a giant in the grass when there's grain in a store and a calf behind a fence? The elephant went from the best thing you could kill to the worst. Too slow, too costly, too dangerous, for a return you could now get safely at home. The animal that once meant survival became the one that made no sense to touch. And once it stopped being dinner, we started noticing what it actually was. Here's where the reason stops being about your wallet and starts being about what looks back at you. For a long time, we told ourselves animals were simple. They eat, they sleep, they feel nothing you'd recognize. Then the researchers who gave their lives to wild herds started writing down what they actually saw. They watched elephants come across the bones of a dead relative and fall silent, run the tip of the trunk over the skull, over the tusks, slowly. The way you might touch the face of someone you'd lost. They watched them return to that spot months and years later and do it again. Elephants grieve, not in a story, on camera, in the open, over and over. Then, in 2006, scientists stood a mirror in front of an Asian elephant. Almost every animal treats its reflection as a stranger, another animal to threaten or ignore. This one lifted her trunk and touched a mark that had been painted above her own eye, a mark she could only find by understanding that the elephant in the glass was her. Before that, we had only ever seen that flicker of self-awareness in ourselves, in great apes, and in dolphins. So sit with what that means. Eating an animal that never knows it exists is easy, but eating one that knows its own face, that mourns its dead, that might even remember yours. Something in your chest pulls back before your brain can explain it. People felt that long before anyone ran a study. You feel it right now. That flinch is older than the science that finally caught up to it. Now suppose none of that stops you. Suppose you're hungry enough to swallow the guilt, and you decide to actually kill one. Congratulations! You've picked a fight with one of the most dangerous animals alive. An elephant goes from dead still to a full charge at around 25 miles an hour. Faster than you can sprint. carrying the weight of a loaded truck. It can flip a vehicle. It can end a person in seconds. Even now, with rifles and fences and warning systems, elephants still kill hundreds of people a year. Take the rifle away and put a wooden spear in your hand, what your ancestors actually walked up with. Closing on a living wall of muscle with a sharpened stick meant somebody in the group probably wasn't walking home. That's the trade every early hunter could run in his head in a heartbeat. Maybe you feed everyone for a month. Maybe you bury your best hunter for nothing. Next to that, a deer looks like a gift. A wild pig looks like a gift. The elephant was never worth the funeral. And then, while all of this was hardening into instinct, we did something stranger than just leaving the elephant alone. We lifted it up. Once we stopped hunting it, the elephant became a worker, hauling timber, carrying kings, marching into war. When Alexander the Great pushed into what is now Pakistan, his hardened soldiers reportedly froze at the sight of war elephants lined up across the field. You don't eat the animal doing the work of 30 men, you don't eat your own army, then it climbed higher still into the temple. Across the Hindu world, there is a beloved god with a human body and an elephant's head, Ganesha, called on before a wedding, a journey, anything new. In Buddhist tradition, a white elephant is a sign of something holy. You do not carve a creature into the ceiling of your most sacred place and then argue about how to cook it. And here is the part that should raise the hair on your arms. This same verdict turned up in peoples who had never met. Different continents, different gods, no way to send a word to one another. And they reached the identical answer, again and again. This one, we leave alone. That much agreement, arrived at that many times by people blind to each other, is the loudest signal in the whole story. Now the honest part, because someone always pushes back here. People do eat elephant. In pockets of Central and West Africa, it still turns up as bushmeat, usually carved from an animal a poacher already killed for its ivory, eaten out of hardship when there's little else. And in a few southern African countries, when a herd grows big enough to flatten farms, a limited number are culled and the meat goes to nearby villages. But look at the shape of every one of those exceptions. Need, hardship, management, last resort. Never the animal a culture chooses to raise and build its meals around. The exception isn't a hole in the rule. It's the clearest proof the rule is really there. So step back and look at what happened. Nobody signed a law. No council ruled the elephant off the menu. And yet on separate continents in languages that never touched, people who would never meet reached the same verdict about this one animal, not that one. The cost that never added up, the mind behind its eyes, the danger that could bury you, and the pull to make it holy. Four forces all leaning the same way until the biggest meal on land quietly walked off the menu and stayed off. And here's the part that's actually about you. You never reached that verdict. You were handed it whole, the day you were born, and you followed it your entire life without once being asked whether you agreed. So before you go, picture the one animal you would refuse to eat, no matter how hungry you got. Got it? That flinch you just felt is thousands of years old, and it was never really yours. Tell me what you pictured down in the comments. I read the ones that come with a reason. And if this rearranged something in your head, subscribe. The next one pulls the same thread somewhere darker.